So this building and the building immediately adjacent used to be, well, I would say it was probably the biggest horse palace in the world at one stage. It was the pet project of the Prince Regent, future George IV, and he came down to Brighton because he had a lover down here and because the races were here, and he loved horses, and he built himself an enormous stable building and an enormous riding house, he called it. So this was a riding school where horses would probably canter, if not gallop, around. Victoria came along and she thought it was a little bit embarrassing, all of this stuff that had been built down in Brighton. So she flogged it back to the city corporation. So the building has had many lives. It became a corn exchange, and then it became a venue for skaters, skating rink. During the First World War, it was a hospital for Indian soldiers. And then towards the end of the war, it became a centre for the development of prosthetic limbs, which is kind of interesting. So that's another life. And then in the 60s, 70s, we had The Who here. We had ABBA next door doing Waterloo and winning the Eurovision Song Contest. It's always been an amazing thing as it's gone on in this building.
Brighton Dome Brighton Festival is an arts organisation. We're a charity that promotes and presents music, theatre, dance across the year, across 3 spaces. We engage with around 650,000 people a year. Fundamentally, the spaces needed restoring. They were deteriorating at a rapid rate, but they also really didn't work in a practical sense. They were very expensive to run and very manually intensive. We also had a real problem with engaging audiences. 5.5 million people walk down New Road, which is one of the roads that's adjacent to the property, every year, and yet they looked at our backside with a bin store and something that looked like a loo block. And so we wanted to really open up the spaces, open up the frontage, but also the interiors so that visitors could appreciate them, understand something of their heritage, but that we could also use them practically and present as much work and turn it around as quickly as possible from one format to another.
I've always liked the process of stripping away unwanted layers and getting back to what was there. And we know exactly what was here because there is this beautiful illustration by Augustus Pugin, who was working with John Nash in the 1820s and has done a beautiful engraving of the serene simplicity of this horse shed. You can see the Prince Regent in the balcony up above, and you can see horses prancing around, and you can see that it is a beautiful, it's a sort of architectural barn, really. It also happens to be the widest span timber arch truss building in the country. It has a very novel method of construction. It's plated timber, so each of these arched members that goes right the way across is a series of plates of timber that are bolted together. So it's very interesting from a structural engineering perspective. And when you stripped back all the tat that had been added over the years and all the layers of horrendous decoration, it was sort of salmon pink inside here, I seem to remember. You got to something really amazing as a shell of a building.
What's wonderful about the way Field and Clegg Bradley Studios have approached this project is the honesty about the buildings is really evident, and returning them to, as far as possible, their original state, but then making the services and practical provisions actually work has been remarkable.
So our challenge was really to redo the back of house and redo the front of house, but our main intervention, if you like, was to fill in a courtyard, which gave us foyer spaces on 3 different levels, as well as a little atrium space to illuminate them, and also lets light through into the giant windows of the Corn Exchange. So you have the ability to look into the theatre that you're going to go into, which is quite unique. It doesn't happen, I think, in any other theatres that I know of. And equally, when the house lights in the theatre go on and the theatre's finished, you can see through these giant windows into the foyer where your drink is going to be in the interval. And, you know, having that connectivity, I think, makes it really special, particularly when there's both of them such nice spaces.
For us, the things that change our lives in practical terms are the basement underneath us that creates a store for all of our equipment, the retracting seating which now houses 505 seats rather than the 320 that we had before. So that immediately makes events here financially viable in a way that they weren't previously. And then they connect to foyer spaces that mean these spaces are fully accessible now in a way that they weren't. We have 2 bars now that then connect to the studio theatre, which is a 250-seat space, again fully restored, but also made in a way that it is accessible to audiences and to disabled artists. Anita's room is a new creative space in the top of the development, and that is a space dedicated to artists. It's accessible by them at any time of the day and night, and really changes our life as being able to offer artists a meaningful working space to create new work and then be able to use these spaces to showcase that work. So right across the piece, there's been this sort of connection of revealing the heritage, but also making practical interventions that mean more people can use them in more creative ways. Brighton has its roots in a Regency town, and it's not news that the pavilion has been the symbol of the city for many years. And these buildings, which are all associated around the Royal Pavilion estate, have really been taken to heart by the people of Brighton and Hove over the last century and a half. And we felt it was our duty collectively to make them more open and more accessible to everybody here, and to try and create a sense of ownership of those buildings. So now people can wander in off the street and see what's going on at any time, whether or not they have a ticket, and look down on the Corn Exchange from the viewing gallery above, really get a sense of these spaces, engage with a heritage volunteer that's here and understand where they've come from and what they might be doing in future. But I hope more than that, there are real opportunities for communities to come together, and the kind of work that we do already and that we want to do even more of is made possible by these spaces.
And the importance of this building is both as a cultural, historical landmark for Brighton, but also as an amazing venue for all kinds of performance arts. And the interiors are just beautifully honest. Here's a timber frame building. Here's a beautiful shed for horses. And the irony, of course, is that it makes a beautiful space for all kinds of performance. And it's gone from this building which was totally devoted to one person's passion in a very sort of esoteric and elitist way, to being a space for this extraordinary city that has developed into the most kind of intriguing and cutting-edge culture in the country.
Your heart lifts every moment you walk into this space. You can't help but look up and look at this incredible ceiling, the roof which is now revealed. It is absolutely beautiful, and I think it is worthy of the creative, inspiring city that it sits at the heart of.